The March meeting of the Rappahannock River Basin Commission. Thank you all for coming. We'll start off with introductions. Here we are another year and another General Assembly session behind us, so all off and running. I will start and we will go to my right. I am Jason Bellis from Lancaster County, the current chair of the commission.
Delegate Philip Scott, 63rd District from Spotsylvania, covers Spotsylvania and Orange, and I'm the current vice chair.
Delegate Bobby Borak, 66th District. Welcome to my district because you're on this side of 301. Delegate Kent has the other side of 301. My district is about half of Caroline, half of Spotsylvania.
Dr. Bender, King George County.
Brian Nickel, District 5 in Orange County, which is Lakewood. David Lee, Board of Supervisors, Culpeper County.
Culpeper Fluid Water District, it's 5 counties: Culpeper, Madison, Green, Orange, and Rappahannock.
Ronnie Gill, a board of supervisors for vice chair of the Census County.
Janet Holmes, City Council, Fredericksburg City.
Dr. Pamela Young, I am the Board of Supervisors, almost at school board, but I was school board before 4 years. Board of Supervisors, Stafford County. This is my 4th year on this commission.
Kevin Marshall, Spotsylvania County, Board of Supervisors.
Woody Henson, Westmoreland County, Board of Supervisors.
Hillary Kent, Delegate District 67, the other side of Caroline and all of the northern neck.
It's all Supervisor Caroline. Glad to have you here.
I'm Deputy Donna A. Rappahannock County Board of Supervisors. Jillian Saul, staff.
Oh, the James staff in the audience.
Scarlett, Saunders, Kimberly, Sarte, with Jalen.
Friend Hunsinger, friends of the Rappahannock. Jeff Boyle, with the George Washington Regional Commission.
Brianna Hughes with the George Washington Regional Commission.
Right, base, Jay, Department of Forestry. Tommy Blackwell, Essex County, from Rappahannock.
And would you like to call out who's online?
Okay, let's see. Let me start with member online, Supervisor Bross.
Hello, this is Ike Broadus, Supervisor for the Scott District in Fauquier County.
Member, unless it's that phone number. I'm going to ask the person on the telephone that we can't see who you are to tell us who you are.
Brian Johnson with Virginia Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Brian. And let's do Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Edwards with the Rappahannock Rapidan Regional Commission.
Next, Lisa Hull with Northern Neck PDC.
Yeah, thank you.
And, see, we've got, and then, oh yeah, the other Lisa Mudcast, please.
Hey, Lisa Mountcastle here by proxy for Senator Richard Stewart.
Okay, and another member joining us, Delegate Higgins. Introduce yourself.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Now, we have one more person online, and I'm not sure who that is. Can you identify yourself? That be Karen Barber? And let's see, just joining us is James with Senator Reed's office. James, would you introduce yourself? Okay, we can see the names up there. Mr. Chairman, that's the best I can do.
All right, thank you again. Welcome, everybody. We'll get back to the actual agenda instead of skipping ahead. Let's start with the invocation.
And Delegate Rorak is going to lead us the invocation.
We're all saying,
We'll say.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. Blessings of each and every day. Lord, we thank you for watch care, safe travels out here. As you continued watch care through today's activities. As your guidance through our deliberations this afternoon. Help us be ever mindful, help us stewards of the great gifts that you give us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please stay standing for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Termination number 4. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum in person in the room. Thank you. Again, welcome everybody. First up on the agenda today, it's our first of the year meeting, so we have the election of the chair and the vice chair and the executive committee. I will turn it over to Elvin.
Okay, this is so I get to play chair for a moment. Like to open the floor for nominations for chair for the calendar year 2025.
A motion for Philip Scott. Motion for Philip Scott.
Second.
Chair.
I'll second. Any other nominations? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Now get to pass it back.
All right, next up on the agenda is the election of vice chair. Do I hear any nominations?
I'll nominate Kevin Marshall.
We have a second? Second. Properly moved second. Any other nominations? Close the nominations. All in favor of Kevin Marshall being vice chair?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Congratulations, Marshall. Next up, Mr. James, what are the other positions that we need to elect?
Okay, we need to elect the members of the executive committee, and remember, each year we do this. We haven't had an executive committee meeting in years because it only exists in an emergency situation. And primarily it was created a long time ago by Paul. I got your lunch over here. Oh, do you? Next question, please. Excuse me. Okay, important things first. Okay. Years ago, in the bylaws of this commission, we staff cannot apply for a grant without express permission from the commission. We had a situation where some kind of a quick turnaround occurred and there was no way to deal with it. So bylaws created allow for an executive committee. The executive committee is empowered to act in that situation. We've never had it happen since. And then be ratified by the full commission next time they meet. So we have one member from chair and the vice chair serve, and one member from the Upper Basin, which is the Rappahannock Regional Commission localities, one from the Middle Basin, which is GWRC localities, and one from the Lower, which is the Middle Peninsula Northern Neck PDC localities. And this past year, Kevin Marshall was the Middle Basin, Tom O'Halloran, later replaced by Debbie Donahue. It was the Upper Basin, and Ronnie Gill was the Lower Basin. And so we just need to elect those three, just in case we have any.
Awesome.
For the, you'll be representing the Middle Basin.
Northern? No.
You'll be representing the GWRC localities. Dr. Young, his name has been put up. Upper Basin, I think Debbie indicated a willingness to continue. Okay, and Ron. Mr. Chairman, you have your slate to put forward.
So before us is Debbie Haney from Rappahannock, Dr. Young from Spotsylvania, and Mr. Gill from Essex County for the remainder positions on the executive committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Stafford County. My apologies. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Next up on the agenda is the appointment of fiscal agent again, Mr. James.
Mr. Chair, the Code of Virginia requires that this commission designate a fiscal agent annually. Chip Wills, the executive director of George Washington Regional Commission, has indicated they are willing to continue. They have served as our fiscal agent since the very beginning. So we need a motion and adoption of designating George.
And do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is review and approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to that? Any recommended changes? And then do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Chair, I move that we in the agenda to have item 8 proceed item 7, so that here staff will review legislation relevant to the commission for legislative reform.
Okay, we have a recommended change of swapping points 7 and 8. Any objection to that? Any other discussion or recommended changes? All in favor of accepting the amended agenda? Aye. Any opposed? The amended agenda is approved unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda, we have the RRBC fiscal year 25 work plan, the year-to-date financial report, and the minutes from December 24 meeting. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Do we have anybody here from the public that would like to speak?
Brent Hudson, your friends of the Rappahannock, simply to point out, actually, you all should be pointing out, there is a new septic relief program that has been rolled out. It is a grant program. You all want to say a little bit more about that for them to know? It's more money coming in for septic.
Yeah. The George Washington Regional Commission has received a couple of grants to, we actually just launched on Monday, the septic relief program, which offers between 50 and 80% cost share for failing septic systems, straight pipes or pit pretties, for repairs or replacements. We're really excited about that. We've already gotten a couple of interest forms, so that relief is on. Yeah, it's only for the GWRC.
Anybody else for public comment? Hearing none, moving on to the JLARC Data Center Study and Report. We have two members from JLARC. If you would mind at the podium introducing yourselves.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sarte, and I reside JLARC Study of Data Centers. And joining me is Scarlett Saunders, who was the lead analyst for the natural resources portion of the study. And we are very happy to help with you this afternoon. Unfortunately, the project leader for the study, Mark Ribbon, is not able to be with you here today because he is actually kayaking down Grand Canyon and Colorado River as we speak. So, but Scarlett and I will walk you through the key findings from the study, and we will. For those of you who may not know much about JLARC, JLARC is a legislative branch agency that does independent, objective, nonpartisan research at the direction of the Commission. The Commission itself is composed of 14 senior members of the House and Senate, and then there's a nonpartisan staff of about 30 people, which is what Scarlett. Oops, can you skip to the beginning of the presentation? Okay, that's sorry, am I going backwards? You're going to to slide 2. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So in 2023, the JLARC Commission directed us to look at Virginia's data center industry, and these are the items that the resolution asked us to review. We reported the findings of our review to the questions. Sure. There's no mic. I'll talk louder. We reported the findings of our review to the Commission in December of 2024. Scarlett and I will cover all of these items today to some extent, but we will focus most on natural resources, in particular water resources, since we know that's what you all are most interested in. And there's much more detail on the other areas in the report, but I'm also happy to try to answer any questions that you may have. So starting off with a little back. So why do we have data centers? Data centers are key hubs of the modern global digital infrastructure. They make everything from surfing the internet to swiping and cutting cards. And that's because every web page, app, or streaming video exists somewhere on a server inside the data center. The industry is growing rapidly right now, in large part because of how the pandemic accelerated ongoing trends such as vastly increasing telework. The other major trend is the emergence of AI, which requires a lot of computing power to train and operate, and is expected to drive future industry. The industry is dominated by a few large companies, which are listed here. And while there are a number of different data center owners and operators, in practice, they're often building and renting out whole facilities to one of the big four companies. So what exactly is a data center? These are large industrial scale buildings, similar in appearance to a distribution center. The new ones are extremely large, and some have footprints that are bigger than a pro sports arena and can be as big as a football stadium. Inside, they have rooms filled with computer servers, which is where all the data and computing activity goes on. That generates a lot of heat, so they employ massive cooling systems, and in this picture, they're located on. Powering all that computing and cooling requires an enormous amount of energy, so they often have their own electrical substation served by a nearby transmission line. Uptime is critical, so data centers have numerous backup generators in case the power goes out. And these are the structures that look like semi-truck containers along the side of the data center in this picture. Facilities are maintained and operated by a few administrators, IT staff, engineers, and maintenance workers. And there's also round-the-clock security. Now, as you probably know, Northern Virginia is the largest data center market in the world, accounting for 13% of global operational capacity and 25% of capacity in the Americas. Northern Virginia became a market leader for a number of reasons, including being located in the birthplace of the internet, proximity to the federal government, strong fiber network, reliable and cheap energy, and the state's sales tax exemption. While Virginia's data center market is concentrated in a few localities in and around Northern Virginia, in particular Loudoun and Prince William County, there are also small markets in central and south side Virginia. The localities shown here with a thick border are those that already have. However, Virginia's data center market is growing and expanding into new localities. And you can see here that localities with projects in development are shaded. With the darker the shading, the more projects in development. Most new development is expected along the I-95 corridor from Northern Virginia down to the Richmond area. And as you can see, there are some in the Rappahannock Basin area. And I'm happy to pause here for any questions, Mr. Chair.
Certain questions.
Okay. Next up, we can discuss the industry's economic and fiscal impacts. Our main findings here are that data centers provide economic benefits mostly during their initial construction, and they can generate substantial tax revenues for localities that have them. We had an independent consultant estimate the annual economic impacts of the industry in Virginia, which you can see here. In recent years, the industry supported 74,000 jobs on average, which is on the far right table. These include direct jobs like building and working in data centers, and indirect jobs to support these workers, sectors like retail or housing. The industry also provided on average an estimated $5.5 billion in labor income and $9.1 billion in state GDP. As you can see, most of the impact occurs during the construction phase of data centers, which is in the first column. During construction, a single data center site can employ up to 1,500 workers during peak activity, including workers like electricians and skilled construction workers. Once a facility is operational, there are relatively few staff given the building size, but these jobs do compete. The economic benefits of the industry are concentrated in Northern Virginia, where most data centers are currently located in construction, but other regions of the state also do benefit. As I mentioned, localities with data centers can collect substantial tax revenues from the industry, mostly from the business personal property tax and real estate taxes. The amount of revenue collected depends on several factors, but looking at localities with relatively mature markets, we found that industry tax revenues range from less than 1% to 31% of total revenues. And you can see that Loudoun and Prince William, the two largest markets, receive substantial amounts of revenue. And this data is actually for fiscal year 23, and I think Prince William has actually recently reported an increase in their revenue.
Mr. Chair, I do got a question directly on this. One of the things I was looking forward to this study, but one of the things I was disappointed was there was no comment based on the 2023 Cloud Infrastructure Act and its difference in tax revenue for those counties that came after the Northern Virginia counties. So I was very disappointed that that was not highlighted in this.
I apologize, I don't have a lot to say on that for you today, but I can take that back, and if we have any comment, I can.
And just for those in the room that are maybe not familiar, there's a difference between the Northern Virginia localities and can agree to a higher tax rate where we're locked in at a lower tax rate until 2051, which I think is a little ridiculous.
Okay.
That they have that tax rate for that.
Thank you. We'll make note of that. We'll follow up on that.
All right.
And this is a personal property tax? This is personal property?
It's, you know, the $1.25 is on.
Okay.
That's for senior.
Sorry.
Machinery and food.
Okay.
And I know there's different opinions.
Was there a question?
No, I just wanted to make a point that was not highlighted. I had asked Mako about it. That was the one disappointment I had. And then the one other question, this is actually a question, I've heard this from some other folks in the state is, how does this affect your money that you get, the LCI students, you know, for trying to phrase this correctly, because when they calculate it, what I understand, it's at 100% of the revenue we get that. That means that we have the ability to pay more. But for those localities under that cloud infrastructure grant, we have to give a bit back to those tax revenues. But from my understanding, the LCI is still calculated at 100%. So that kind of is a disadvantage. Okay. So did you ever look into that?
Yeah. So in Stafford County, we just had our first big data center approved, hasn't been built yet. And it was being assessed at around $10 million on that Esquimalt Hill Road land. It's now being reassessed at over $300 million. It looks like in Stafford County is collecting tax.
Yeah, that's not what I was asking.
I know, I just want to make sure.
Oh, I totally understand. I'm well versed in this.
I was a board member for 12 years, so that's why I.
So I think we'll work on getting an answer to that and come back unless you have an answer right now.
Sure, no, I am.
No, and I
familiar with
just
the
want to
composite
bring it up
index.
since we're here.
And I will talk with the members of our team. I don't know that we really looked at the LCI issue. I don't think we did, but I can certainly, I'll ask and I'll ask about the.
Because for small localities, that would be a big amount of tax revenue we're gonna have to. The state looks at us as having an ability to pay at a lot of higher rate, even though we're not receiving 100% of that revenue from the data center.
Okay, that's a good question.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, the energy impact of data centers is a key issue. So next I will go over the key takeaways from our report in this area. But I do want to mention that there's a lot more detail in the report on the energy impacts if you're interested. A modern data center uses a significant amount of energy and substantially more than other commercial or industrial operations. Even a small 18 megawatt facility is roughly equivalent to a mid-sized automobile plant or 4,500 megawatts. However, most data centers being built now are much larger, drawing from 100 to over 200 megawatts of power, which is more than most industrial customers. The industry trend is also to build campuses composed of several large facilities, and their total draw will be well over 1,000 megawatts, which, just to give you some context, is more than the entire generation capacity of one of the 950 megawatt nuclear reactors at Rappahannock. Energy comes from the power grid, which is a complex network of generation, transmission, and distribution systems. Generation refers to the power plants that produce energy. Transmission includes a high voltage lines that move energy from where it's generated to where it's needed. And the distribution system distributes energy to individual customers. While data centers utilize the same generation and transmission systems as other energy users, because they draw so much power, they typically have their own distribution systems. We found that the data center industry is driving an immense increase in energy demand and building enough new infrastructure to address demand. So this slide shows a statewide energy demand forecast that we had commissioned from an independent consultant. The top line is a full unconstrained demand forecast, which projects what energy demand could be before accounting for constraints like being able to build enough infrastructure. As you can see, it closely matches the forecast that PJM, the regional grid operator, put together using data from state utilities. If you drop down to the middle line, you can see what would happen if only half of unconstrained demand materializes. And even under this scenario, demand could double by 2040. Dropping down to the bottom line, you can see what the forecast predicts if there were no future data center. The takeaway here is that almost all of demand is being driven by data centers, not other things like population growth or electric vehicles. New generation and transmission infrastructure will need to be built to help address energy demand. And we had another consultant build a complex model of Virginia and the regional PJM grid to predict what infrastructure and imports would be needed to meet demand. And you can see that either scenario 1, which is unconstrained demand, or scenario 2, which is only half of unconstrained demand, would require a massive increase in energy infrastructure and imports. The report includes more detail.
Hold on 1 second, we have a question.
I have a quick question regarding this massive demand that's not being driven by the general public. Who's going to be on the hook for paying for all that?
Right, that's a good question. I'll actually be addressing that in the next section. The point is, so far, it's been data centers have not been subsidizing other customer classes, but there are some concerns moving forward, and I'll explain about that. The report includes more detail on the types of generation that would need to be built, but it would include new renewable solar and wind facilities, natural gas plants, nuclear plants, and other assets. On the transmission side, it includes transmission lines to move power across the state and to import additional power from out of state. We found that this demand growth raises concerns about system capacity and reliability, but existing utility requirements and processes limit those risks. That's not to say that the risks aren't real, but there are a lot of utilities, regulators, and others monitoring this, and a lot of planning and protections in place to manage demand growth and bring new load on safely. We also found that there are some things the data center industry could do around the margins to help with their energy impacts, and a couple of bills were adopted this session to implement these recommendations. And they're actually listed off this slide. We also found that data centers are currently paying the full cost of services I just mentioned, but future demand is likely to increase future costs. On that first point, our independent consultant found that data centers are currently paying the full cost of service, meaning they're not being subsidized by other customers. In other words, currently, utility rate structures are appropriately allocating and recovering costs. However, growing data center energy demand is likely to significantly increase costs system-wide in the future. And a portion of those costs are likely to be recovered from our customers. And that's because if utilities are building a lot of new generation plants and transmission lines that would not otherwise be built, the overall cost pie gets bigger, and those costs can get spread across the whole customer base. Using data from our consultants, we estimated that the typical residential bill for a Dominion Energy customer is about $90 a month for transmission and generation. And I want to make the point, a lot of times people will say, this isn't the Dominion bill I've seen, but they have a lot of other things in their bill, and this is just the transmission and generation portion of it. Under scenario 1, which is unconstrained demand, we estimated customer could be billed an additional $37 by 2040. And under scenario 2, which is half of unconstrained demand, the increases were smaller, but not insignificant. So this begs the question, as you just raised, of what could be done to isolate non-data center customers from the cost increases. And there are several things utilities could do to help isolate customers, including creating a separate data center customer class, which a few co-ops have already done, adopting new cost allocation methods for assigning costs to the new customer class, and adjusting rates more frequently. We found that the SCC is best positioned to examine this issue rather than trying to legislate specific customer classes, because utility cost allocation and rate design is highly complex and technical, and legislation was passed this session directing the SCC to assess rate classifications. And Mr. Chair, I'm happy to pause here if there's any more questions.
I have one question, Mr. Bellows and then Dr. Young.
You say that already that data centers are being, basically covering their own cost of energy consumption. Yet we're building windmills and all this generation that are Dominion is surcharging the customers for that we don't obviously really need based on your demand forecasts. So that demand that we're already paying for in solar, $900 million in wind overcharges for their offshore wind charge. Those are all being paid to the rate customers right now. We don't need that power. If that power is being built for essentially data centers, we're already subsidizing those substantially. And that's at odds with your finding in the report.
Right, so we, like I said, we had an independent consultant come in and they looked at, their company was E3 and they have a lot of, expertise in this area. And they looked, I think, at Dominion, and a couple of the co-ops. And what they found is, as of today, there is not subsidization going on to the data centers. However, in the future, as additional infrastructure gets built, to your point, just because overall costs will increase so much, that would be a concern. But their findings were that as of today, and they did a pretty detailed look, there is not cross subsidization.
Then why are we being asked to subsidize $900 million of offshore wind if we don't obviously need? I mean, that's not for us, then it's subsidizing and paying for data centers.
I mean, there's part of, I'm gonna get a little over my skis here, because unfortunately, Mark Ribbon, who's a project leader, was our energy expert, and so he mentioned he's not here today. There is some new renewables that are being built because of the BCEA, because there is this required transition to renewable energy. But again, when we had this detailed analysis done, right now, there's not cross subsidization for the data centers because of the way the utilities are billing.
I would follow that. I would say Virginia Clean Economy Act is the big driver of those additional costs on the energy bills, not so much data centers. So keeping those two different things separate, even though they like to be combined in conversation, those are two separate issues that are related, but it's the Clean Economy Act that's allowing that taxation of the ratepayers to be placed on the bill. And we passed legislation to make it transparent so that everybody sees that some utilities were doing it. And then, there was that added transparency mechanism that was put in place. So hopefully that brings some clarity. It's the offshore wind fees that you're seeing is not directly related to the data centers. They're two different things that the General Assembly is trying to navigate at the same time. The economy and then the data centers. Dr. Young, got a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. This is something that I've been looking forward to and asking for, so I thank Alan for you all here. One of the questions I had is about utilities, and I do ask my own local government as to what we could do there. And of course, the answer would be we're looking into it. What I was thinking is the SEC regulation perhaps when they say they're planning on addressing this design to have a level for data centers, and then also one for businesses, because there are some businesses that are distribution centers, for example, drawing a lot of electricity also. And then again, the homes, because it appears that, there are homes that on set income and we try to support them. But right now, in the way how things are going, I think that more individuals are going to be needing that. So my question is there anything in there to have several tiers, not just data centers and then the rest?
Yes, that's a good question. So my understanding is right now, I think there are separate customer classifications, even in Dominions. They have different customer classes. The co-ops do right now, data centers, well, they're with the industrial. So I think a lot of times there might be, I don't remember all, but there might be like industrial, commercial, residential. And so I think there are different data center, there are different customer classes for utilities now. I don't know whether the SEC would be looking at, whether distribution or other large power users would be in a different customer class, but I would think they would try and make something that was kind of agnostic to who's using power. It's just that data centers use so much that they kind of put some.
If you don't mind giving us your communication, so that we could ask additional questions, because I wanted to make sure that class transfer into a different utility rate versus just, oh, you're in this class, but this is what you pay versus having.
Right, yes, and I do believe that the rates are, the customer class rates are designed rates. So. I believe they do, but I have to. Do my
I'll also add into that, the concern that was brought to me during session was that data centers are paying less than residential customers, and that's just not true. I checked with a variety of different, I've checked with Rappahannock Electric, Dominion, they're not at that same rate class or lower than residential. Their rate is that of a business entity of equal structure or designation. And so there is that element. So when we talk about these different rates, also keep in mind that their rates they're paying for the energy is that of a business of their type. It's not the same as residential.
Absolutely, and if it's helpful, kind of to build on your point, Delegate, we had our consultant kind of independently assign the costs, and when they compared it to how Dominion had assigned the costs, they were within $1, sometimes it hit it to $1. So I think right now, you find that the cost is being allocated appropriately. It's just the future for the concern. So I will, if there are no other questions,
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Right, the reserve. Country County, Westmoreland County. What I'm worried about, everybody forgive me if I'm wrong in here, but I really need an answer to. I'm scared to death. The 5 counties that make up the northern neck. It's been explained to me by a power company that we don't have the lines to facilitate one data center. So my mind says somebody's got to pay for new lines in these poles. And who's really going to pay for it? Somebody earlier today brought that up. But I'm worried about my government. And I know half the people in this room are government and friends of mine. But it's so easy for Richmond and counties to go for data centers and expansion because they look at the tax revenue it's going to create. As I live in Westmoreland County in between 2 rivers, I want to make this statement because I enjoy being on this board. I enjoy protecting the Rappahannock River and our natural resources. I've had a farmer this week tell me he's going to sell 250 acres of his woodland to a solar, so the trees will be cut down. I used to just be worried about farmland, but the prices that are being offered, and I was offered a price last Saturday, and everybody that knows me knows I'm not going to sell it to a solar farm, but the price was so gigantic. It's only because I'm so old and enjoy hunting and fishing and my grandchildren on the farm. But if I was 25 years old, I would have taken the money. It's a lifetime to spend it. But I'm so old now, it's no way I can have that much fun with the money. What I want everybody in this room to understand, feel in their heart and mind, and not just give numbers, is I don't believe solar and wind will last 15 years. I believe nuclear package systems are what's going to take over. So I don't know what the LLCs that everybody's building. I don't know who's going to clean up all this glass and level all this land and protect our environment. I'm going to speak a minute on that and ask you, even though I know environment is yours, but I want you to know what the worry is. We know what filter strips do for protecting the Rappahannock and Potomac rivers. But trees are 3 times more valuable than filter strips. The price tag is so big right now for a solar farm. Sell your rights. Well, let me go on and say it. I was offered $4 million for 200 acres. That's crazy. I know that a solar farm can't produce enough current to justify the cost that's going in. The government pays $191,000 an acre to the developer that builds the solar farm. That current is not constant, so that's why you have to have the backup generators. Solar cannot produce what these data centers are going to need constantly. We are trading our natural resources. And I hate to say this, people don't come to the Northern Neck to see Woody Henson or even Hillary. They come because of two rivers, the woods and the farm fields, and the beauty of our natural resources. I contend that we're selling eggs. And I don't think we're looking at it long range and as hard as we should. And I think greed for money is taking over good sense. I thank you for listening to that, but I really believe that.
Thank you. And Mr. Honey, you had some.
Yeah, my question, being in Rappahannock County, we are not suitable for data center. But we're being surrounded by counties and data centers. The electric is gonna go up. And we're not gonna get any benefits from that electricity increase. So it's some sort of effort to take care of the data centers that surround us. Is there any consideration on citizens of a county like Rappahannock that would somehow not have, but is there some way to protect our citizens from the cost increase that's gonna happen with electric?
Yes, that's a good question. I can see why you all would be concerned. And I think, like I said, creating customer classes, looking the way the costs are allocated and the frequency with which they kind of adjust the costs are some of the main levers that the SEC has. They had a convention back in December where it was more an information collection effort, but that is something that they are looking into. I don't know whether I did attend that, but you know, certainly that's something that localities could bring to them as something to consider, because I can see what you would be concerned, but yeah, they are looking at the customer class issue and it up spread costs.
There's some way for us to get involved early. Part of the conversation.
Yeah, I can.
So, I'm gonna let Delegate Mildy go real quick, and then for the interest of time, I feel like a lot of these question comments might actually be answered with local residential impacts, natural resource impacts, as was just mentioned, local residential impacts, and recommendations and policy options. So, Delegate Mildy, I'll let you go, and then I'm gonna ask them to go through the remaining points so we can get through this, and then hold your questions to the end because they might be answered in the rest of it.
We were alluded to as legislators a couple of times. We are seeing these bills come through that will absolutely directed at making sure that we're not paying, that residents aren't paying for data center electricity. And there is no group of legislators trying to stop those. There's a lot of pro data center people in Richmond, but none that are that pro data center are trying to see that cost shifted. So I think you should look to us, expect that kind of protection coming out of Richmond.
Mr. Chair, we're gonna have time to make a comment at the very end. Because
yes, at the end of the presentation, we'll come back to questions and closing comments. So please continue on.
I'll turn it over to Scarlett now.
Well, thank you all for being here. Our first finding related to natural resources is that data center backup generators emit pollutants, but their use is minimal and existing regulations largely promote the backup standards. So, because data centers are known as energy use and they need to be online 24/7, they rely on a large number of diesel generators for backup power. These generators emit several harmful pollutants that can contribute to smog and have other problems. It's for that reason that DEQ regulates their use according to state and national standards, including requiring permits for all data center use of generators. Permits set limits on generator use and emissions, and their emissions are monitored. In practice, these backup generators are rarely run for prolonged periods. They are primarily run for maintenance testing, which takes place about once a month for 10 to 15 minutes. And they can run for longer periods during prolonged outages, but data center companies report that they experience. And so for these reasons, backup generator emissions are unlikely to harm regional air quality. In Northern Virginia, where of course data centers are most concentrated, diesel generator emissions accounted for about 4% of regional oxide emissions and 0.1% of carbon monoxide emissions. And moreover, as the industry has grown their regional air quality, it has actually. The biggest emissions risk would be a prolonged power outage. And in such event, a large number of these generators could kick on at the same time, and if the outage lasts long enough, contribute to temporary air quality issues. However, such outages are rare, and air quality will return to normal. The other potential risk is local impacts from the routine maintenance testing in areas immediately surrounding some of the larger data clusters, such as in Cloud and William. And to identify any localized issues, DEQ has recently launched a 3-year study to closely monitor emissions in local. Our next topic looks at water use by the industry, and we found that data center water use is currently sustainable as the state ensures sustainable. Most data centers use about the same amount or less than an average large office building, although there are some. The amount of water that a data center will use varies depending on the type of cooling system it employs. For instance, those with evaporative cooling can require a fair amount of water, while those that are dry cooling will only need water for bathroom expansions. Almost all data centers get their water through a water utility, and we collected data from some of these utilities and found that data center customers account for between 0.2% and 21% of their total water withdrawals. Those differences were largely a function of how many data centers the utility served, as well as how large the utility is. And to put it further into context, data center water use accounted for less than 5% of the state. So as the data center industry is growing, we can expect that water use to increase over time, and this has raised concerns about sustainability. State regulation appears to sufficiently address these concerns. DEQ regulates water use and requires permits for large-scale withdrawals. Before issuing a permit, DEQ models whether the withdrawal would be sustainable, and that happens both when a permit is first issued and then if it's increased or if the modeling finds that the withdrawals are not sustainable, then a permit would not be issued unless that sustainability question would be addressed. For instance, if there are drought concerns and adequate process. And the same process is used by the permit gets its own, the data center gets its own permit, or if it's getting it through a water utility. That said, some localities have limited water resources, which should consider how the proposed data center could affect their ability to meet residential demand or pursue other development opportunities. Code gives localities some broad authority in this area, but some of the localities, different stakeholders that we talked to weren't sure if they could request that information from proposed data center developers or use that in their zoning and special use decisions. So we recommended the code explicitly grant localities the ability to request that information. And this past session, the General Assembly passed companion bills HB 61 and 1449 had a provision for localities to be able to request and use that information from high energy use facilities like data centers. And the governor had a recommendation that be passed in next session. So outside of direct water use by data centers, we found that data centers may also impact water resources through their site construction. However, these impacts are similar to other large development impacts in federal, state, and local regulations. So constructing a new development may change land characteristics, modify stormwater runoff patterns, and/or disturb nearby waterways like wetlands and streams. Such impacts can increase water pollution, destroy wildlife habitat, and increase flooding and erosions. Most data centers have been built on previously natural and agricultural lands, which can reduce the protection of water resources. However, the development pressures from data centers don't appear to stand out from other fast-growing developments. For example, the total land area of all the data centers that are operating in Virginia as of last August was equal to about 1.5% of all the farmland lost in Virginia in 2017. And the proportion is larger for the Northern Virginia counties. However, due to other growth in these counties, a variety of stakeholders we talked with indicated that if not for data centers, the land would have been developed. Additionally, the relatively large footprint of data center developments can lead to relatively large storm waterway impacts. However, the subject matter experts spoke with did not believe that data centers were unique from any other large-scale developments like warehouses and shopping centers and warehouses. So federal and state regulations require permits for sizable stormwater and wetland stream impacts. The stormwater permits would require developers to manage any stormwater runoff changes, such as having on-site stormwater plant, filters, or runoff. And wetland and stream permits require first that the developer avoid or minimize impacts to the extent possible, and then compensate for any significant impacts that do occur. And we spoke with federal, state, and local regulatory staff. They did not see where data center impacts warranted any industry specific. Finally, in Virginia, localities have full discretion through their zoning to determine the degree to which natural and agricultural lands should be conserved, as no federal or state laws require conservation or mitigation of impacts. And we didn't see the basis for the state to impose land use restrictions on data centers, as this would be a profound change in state authority, and as the impacts of data centers seems to involve faster. I will turn it back to.
We also looked at the impacts of data centers on local residents, and we found that a growing number of data centers are being built close to residential areas, impacting nearby residents. However, some localities have taken steps to minimize impacts. So as we've discussed, modern data centers are large industrial facilities, and they are largely incompatible with residential neighborhoods. In addition to the building size and appearance, they regularly test diesel generators, have massive cooling systems that have the potential to create noise, and often have electrical substations located on site. Even so, we found that about 1/3 of operational data center properties in Virginia are within 200 feet of residentially zoned properties. These pictures show 2 examples of data centers that were built for a plant adjacent to neighborhoods in Virginia. While most data centers are far from residents and cause no issues, residents living close to data centers have frequently reported concerns, or have reported concerns, most notably data center noise, which can be low frequencies, drone sound, or humming sound. Some localities have allowed data centers to be built next to residential areas because of either inadequate planning and zoning, or their elected boards approve special permits for rezonings for data centers. However, resident opposition to data centers have grown in recent years, particularly in Northern Virginia, and it looks like localities are responding to these concerns to manage future development. But the success of these efforts will ultimately depend on the boards because they have authority to grant exceptions to any of the rules. Our report summarized several practices localities should implement, which are listed here, to minimize residential impacts from data center developments. And the legislation that Scarlett mentioned previously also addresses some of these concerns, particularly related to noise. Now, as you probably gleaned, our report included a number of recommendations and policy options for the General Assembly to consider. And I don't have them all listed here, they're listed in the report, but this slide gives you kind of a quick overview of them. We recommended some actions to help ensure grid reliability, to try to address some of the power needs and financial concerns. And some of these were implemented in legislation that was passed in session, including some of the legislation we previously mentioned. We also recommended more clarity on what the authority qualities have related to water use and noise. As we mentioned, legislation was adopted that addresses some of this as well. And finally, we had a number of policy actions related to the sales and use tax exemption, which could be used to either continue or slow the district bill and address other policy concerns, including some of the environmental concerns we discussed today. The General Assembly did not take any action on the exemption. Instead, we bring it to the Joint Subcommittee on Tax Policy for further study. But the governor extended the exemption in his recent amendment. The other day, it's been extended to 2025. Mr. Chair, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Taking a 150-page report and summarizing it in 38 PowerPoint slides is an incredible task. So thank you for your time. I know there may be a lot of folks who want to say anything, so we're just going to go around the room, starting with Delegate Milday, and work around if anybody has any closing questions or comments, and that's how we're going to handle the conclusion of this presentation.
I have two quick questions, technical questions. One is the statistics you said as far as the amount of the world's data centers in Virginia. It's not consistent with what I've heard other people tell. They say 70% of data center traffic runs through Virginia. So that's my first question. The second one, this is, I'm apologizing for not understanding water cooling systems. Unlike a building, when you use water to cool, you're not dumping it into the drain, I don't think, or maybe you are. But so what happens to the water they're consuming? Do they keep reusing it, or are they some of it comes up in the sanitary sources?
I can answer your first question, Delegate. Thank you for your question. So, yeah, there are a lot of different numbers out there. What we are reporting is based on megawatts, which is oftentimes how data centers are measured. So it's their energy use. The 70%, I've heard that before. I feel like that might be traffic, which maybe is slightly different. But the source we use is a pretty well recognized industry source. So I feel good that the numbers aren't exact. Northern Virginia accounts for 13% of global operational capacity as measured by megawatts and 25% of capacity in the areas. The next biggest market globally. Regarding the cooling system, it really varies in what they use and the technologies changes. So there's a lot of different ones, but some of them could be like a later. You fill it up one time and maybe after a while you have to top it off, but it's really just a much more fill and using it. For others, it might be evaporation, so they're literally just spraying the air to cool it down, in which case that would respond. And then others might just pass to more in the big set to wastewater.
We had a lot of questions about the electrical system. I think some of that's stemming. I know myself and Ms. Long, we sat in a meeting with Dominion. It was an update. And Nancy, you help me out if I'm wrong with this, but Dominion stated that the infrastructure cost of Dominion would be passed to the ratepayer. But it appears the information that's provided to you all, Dominion, is different than what was provided to us. Well, I think we need to future meeting. Let's invite Dominion, Rappahannock, and I believe going the next power company. Let's invite representatives from them here to speak to this group, clarify, because I think we were probably given some misinformation at the Dominion meeting we were in. Because it seems to me with what you all have done down in Richmond that that's not the case. It's not being passed to the ratepayer. We need that clarification for all the localities.
We were already thinking the same thing, and Mr. James already taking notes on that, so we're really good. Mr. Hisson.
We all need to learn. Thank you for what you've done. you know, I really deep down think we're only halfway there to all of us learning what we should do. I'm so glad you said, so you know that I can cheer one thing you said. I don't know why all of us have driven cars that have radiators. Why we can't use the same water for cooling for data centers if they just have the ability to hold it and recycle it. Putting the straw into the Rappahannock River, water out all you want, you dump it somewhere else. I can't buy into that environmentally. I just can't do it. None of us in this room can use all the water we. It's just something we can't do anymore. You know, it's awful funny that God made us and he made all the animals. And you can plant a seed and get food from it. But all of us have to have water. Or we're not gonna have food or we won't have light. So we really have to concentrate on our water more than we've been doing. So I'm very glad you brought up about there are other ways to cool data centers other than high volumes of water. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just kind of piggyback off of Dr. Young's comment earlier. This was a big conversation when I was involved in when we were in Richmond regarding classifications that I have to be thinking to be really, really careful about. Because data centers, my understanding and knowledge, use exponentially the amount of energy that other warehouses do. And so we had legislation that came about that was very scary to me as an area that maybe looks at small mom and pop grocery stores or watermen that have refrigerators that are cooling seafood. We're starting to tap into some of that and looking at this, but really data centers are a totally different classification and need to be looked at as such and not lumped into. So I get nervous when people start talking about it's not that much different than kind of a warehouse or not that much different than kind of the footprint, because it drastically is. And you really need to be careful of in terms of energy, I think, where we go. So that's just my comment because I was very hyper alert to that because we saw legislation. I think the other part about kind of the Northern Neck that I appreciated just looking at legislation this past session, not to jump out of the order, but we did look at the impacts and I'll go back and read your report of ensuring that when local decisions are made, that key things are brought to the table. And I really thought that was very, very important. And I know Mr. Henson, you talked about this too, in looking at historical sites, agricultural land, and water uses on how that impacts everything, because there is a lot to learn. And taking that into account, I think that would be a great part of kind of this study, as well as saying, what are the components locally that a data center needs to consider? Not that it needs to consider historical, right? But that may be very important to your county and your locality that historical is considered, and making in the locality making that decision. I think we need to really hyper focus. I'd like to see us hyper focus on what that means in terms of our natural resources, our ag land, and our water too. And to beef that up for land use. So those are kind of just my comments.
Can I respond to a couple things? Which we would absolutely agree that while some of the natural resource impacts may not be that different than like a distribution center, so that the energy is completely different and that they use huge amount compared to other users. So we completely agree with that. And actually Delegate Shin has a bill that was signed by the governor that basically requires the SEC to look into customer class, appropriate customer classes. So I think that is a real concern, and you know, they're already doing that, but you're spot on that. Thank you. We did also have some recommendations related to, for instance, on historic resources. We did look at that in the study, and we do have a few you know, we do think that can be a real issue in Scarlett's area, and we do have some options, or not recommendations, or options for how, you know, the sales and use tax for could be modified to require, for instance, a data center company, if they want to get the sales and use tax, that maybe they have to do what is it, a phase one study of things. And there's something that looked on
Is it just historic resources, or does that consider ag land as well?
We did not have any, related to requirements for.
Okay, she's this one. Okay, thank you.
But that bill that passed, HB 1601, it's SB 1449, that if it gets reenacted next year, it does include that localities may require forest land and ag resources are.
And water and forest, right? Okay, super.
Yes, I don't know what everyone else has done, when all this started up, around the area, we developed the ordinance called, or trying to remember what it's good for, plan, innovation, research and technology or something like that. Where and if you haven't done it, you might want to think about it. It does, for anything like this, we before we consider our first aid center, the type of lighting, we have Fort Walker in our county, so everything has to be downlit to a certain amount. We did setbacks, density requirements, location requirements, things that we can have a little bit more control, but we're talking so much about water. I got a diagram sent to me months ago and I kept it in here. The average house uses 236 gallons per day. McDonald's uses 2,297 gallons per day. A hotel, which is understandable, 8,000 gallons a day. A data center uses an average of 825 gallons per day. So it's, yes, it's water, but I think the technology has gotten better than it used to be. And I did tour one of your projects the other day, and they described the cooling system as continually rotating, which, yes, they have a small amount of evaporation, but when they do, it's top it off. But they are getting better at that, which is probably one reason they consider in our county is that there are new technologies in place. I do agree the energy is going to be a big thing, but those new little modules that they're developing, they're like come out, which will be sometime, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll see how that really sends people off. But technology, nobody's going to throw away their computers and their cell phone. If I lose my cell phone, I panic. And I don't see how we can control someone, we can push for the best of everything. I've even pushed for wildlife corridors. Because if they want to be where you want to be, you can ask, the worst they can say is no. So that's been my experience so far, and I just wanted to share.
So much. Mr. Haynes?
Thank you. With the comparison of other large developments, I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen 30 large developments happening within a 5-year period. The speed of this growth and the demand on land is something I don't think I've ever seen. My guess is you don't know, people don't know that. It's going to the other thing I have heard about is security. With all of this data concentrated in the northern part of the state, to me,
We did not look into the security issue. Part of it is that because it's very secure, data centers are already super secure, and then trying to find out what's going on and some other level of security. So that was not something that
Ms. Phillips.
I just have one quick direct comment regarding the natural resources. Was there any study or work done at potential loss of tree canopy in relation to data center?
that was part of the land conversion. So if we look at natural lands, agricultural lands, how it's changed.
thinking statewide data centers are contribute to a large portion of that, and a lot of things, solar things like that. The amount that solar storage is part of that. So that is considered to be talked about.
I think it's something we do have to start relating data centers and power demand together to some degree. Mr. Henson was alluding to is like, we've already said that residential growth is not going to drive power needs. So power need, any new generation that's coming online is going to be driven by data center development. So ultimately, those things tie together. So if we need more, whatever power it is, whether it's nuclear or solar, if that eats away a tree canopy, that's directly related to the advancement of data centers, not growth of population, as your data has said. So at some point, you've got to put those two together as one, because they essentially are on the same train. Because if you don't develop data centers, we don't need the solar as much as we did, so we don't need to develop it. We develop data centers, we're going to need more power, a lot of it. And we're not even scratching the apple, it seems right now, to the amount we're really going to need to develop. Data centers go in the direction they continue to go in.
Piggyback off of your comment, Mr. Bellings. Sorry.
So for interest of time, we're just gonna move around, so.
One comment.
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak to this issue? Gary Higgins.
Mr. Higgins, we'll get to you in a moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Continuing around, more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure if it came up in y'all's research, but why is Northern Virginia / our area the epicenter, both nationally and globally?
It's a variety actually of reasons. It's kind of where the birthplace of the internet, AOL was. There was also, federal government is there and has a high need for data centers. Power, is reasonably priced in Virginia. It's also kind of, in Northern Virginia, flat land. And before there were so many, there was a lot of land, and it's kind of stable land, not a lot of earthquakes. We implemented in 2010, we implemented the sales tax exemption, which made Virginia more attractive. And then the big thing with data centers is there's this big clustering effect. Data centers want to be close to each other because the closer they are, the faster they can transmit data, the lower the latency is. So the more data centers you have, the more they want to be there. And so it's kind of, for all those reasons, that's kind of why there's been also some undersea cables, but I think actually that's built after some of the data centers. But all these reasons have led to the reason for Virginia.
Follow-up to that, is there any speculation of a saturation point? I mean, as of right now, it looks like they can't build them fast enough anywhere. And is there a particular reason for that? I mean, the internet's working now. Well, when do they become built out? Any other speculation?
Right, so that's a good question. I think that based on our research, the sort of things that would lead to kind of a saturation effect would be in Northern Virginia, you're seeing some pushback from the localities. So that, that's when data centers site, they look at several different things. They look at how easy it's going to be for them in dealing with the locality. They also look at, the cost of their operational cost. So, if they're getting a lot of pushback, or if there's it's not predictable the way the localities are going to, whether they're going to approve data centers, that's going to make it less attractive to them. If power becomes more difficult to get, that's going to make it less attractive to them. What they told us is a sales use tax exemption is really important. So if for some reason Virginia got rid of that, that would probably slow things down. So that's kind of what you're going to see.
Yes, what I was gonna bring up before, and I do appreciate that. There's a lot of work on the study. And you can't cover everything, you think of everything, so I do appreciate it, but one thing I have an unusual role for the last year is helping to run our service authority, which is our water and sewer. And one of the things, the energy costs people don't think about is how that is also onto the water and sewer customers, because if you look at the 38 bills that I pay for every month for Dominion, for our lift stations, our pump stations, and our water plant, there is a huge cost depending on how much energy is going to the Lake Anna project, a solar project here. These projects are all listed on the bill, and we have one wastewater treatment plant that pays over $500 in those incidental transmission costs every month, and that gets passed on to the people that get a vital life source, which is, water and sewer. So I did want to bring that to your attention because that is an important consideration that gets passed on to another part you never even think of. And then the last thing is, I asked the data center developer this, and they didn't have an answer because no one asked him this question. But water is very important, and it's not a resource we can make over again, as Mr. Gibson said. And we only get so much water on planet Earth, and then, it's gone. So even with the water cooled that recycles the water, they put a chemical in it. And I've learned a lot about this from purple pipe exploration with water treatment plants and the process you have to go to get your wastewater treatment plant allowable. There's a lot of pre-treatment in your plant and at the industrial site. So once they put that chemical in, it never goes out. So that water is gone forever. So is that a consideration that you've ever thought about? And then, even for the systems where they put the chemical in, that water never comes back because you can't take all the chemicals out of it.
We did look into wastewater discharges. We were concerned about that. Program DEQ regulates all of the discharges, and so anything that's there in the end that is not allowed into the water has to be treated either by the facility, by the wastewater treatment plant or the data center. And they said that all of the chemicals that were already treated as part of that, so there wouldn't be any concerns that wastewater treatment plants already have the authority through their permits that any user they can apply to that. We deal with that. It is very costly, and your wastewater treatment plant has to be go through a process to actually have to be permitted for that. Like we King George, we have no plant that is permitted to take purple pipe water or industrial use water. So those are all costs that are put on in another utility section and a lot of citizens. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Yes, and we do have a small section on reclaimed water also in the report that sort of talks about where it's possible reclaimed systems can be looked at. There are constraints for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple items. Orange County, we currently do not have any data centers in Orange County, but we're surrounded almost. And surrounded by a lot of dark purple, and it's heading our way. I want to applaud you for noting in your report that this is an industrial use, not a little commercial shop or a mom and pop shop or anything. Like, it is a major industrial use, and we're seeing even in the photos that you showed, when you put them next to residential, it's kind of like any other industrial use. If you site those next to residential, you're going to have issues. And that's something that we're deeply concerned about. I'm deeply concerned about in Orange County, that we don't have these incompatible uses next to each other. But as you said, it's up to the locality. And so what we want to do is not make the same mistakes that were made in other places and take those lessons learned and figure out if there is a way to have this industrial facility in the right place with the proper buffering, with the proper site constraints, whether it be setbacks, buffering, a combination thereof. I think that's vitally important. I'm not going to beat the energy horse any more than it's been stated. I think that is as they say, the big issue that has a if we don't really manage that as a Commonwealth. And I know a lot of your report says, well, it's only 1% of this in the Commonwealth. Well, yeah, look at your map. That means nothing. Like that data point means nothing to me. But in this area, it's like majorly significant. So, in other places, it really doesn't matter. So I don't really care about that. But everybody else is going to care about it when they see what happens in this area. So I think that's probably was not addressed the way it should have been, like in a way to say, you have an opportunity here to do some things and not make the same mistakes that were made. You put that in some places, but it also seems like, well, it's just up there for the local or for someone to regulate somewhere. Okay, well, that's all well and good, but it actually has to be done in order for it to be effective. On the water side, I totally agree on the wastewater treatment. We got a wastewater treatment, a plant that's had some upgrades. We've got water treatment concerns. We have one source of water. We had a water emergency before Richmond, by the way. I know all the delegates and senators who were in Richmond when that happened. We were there first back in August, where we had no water for 15,000 people. And it was due to a malfunctioning pump. And we didn't have an alternate source. So there's also sort of this notion of what happens in terms of, you know, if we don't have a way to have water, what's that going to do? I think the cooling systems the technology's catching up with some of that, but then what happens to that water that they're using and how do they get rid of it? And who's going to bear that cost? We're going to bear it at the local level. The ratepayer is going to bear it with either more water that has to be treated with massive campuses or wastewater treatment that needs to take other things into consideration, like the purple pipe scenario. So for one, this report was an eye-opener for me personally, and sort of intuitively noted some of the things we were thinking about and concerned about, particularly the industrial use and the proximity of the residential. I wish you would have been a little more specific about what does that mean, close to residential? What is close? Kind of like, you know, everything else. Well, was that red? Well, no, it's light red. Okay, and that's dark red, and this is light blue or dark blue or light purple or dark purple. What is close? And I don't know what that means, except I saw some photos. That's close, but if you have a massive campus and in the same development, you're contemplating putting 4,200 to 5,000 homes, that seems like that's incompatible. And that's why I applaud you for putting some of those issues out there. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the statutory and regulatory front to make sure that if this is going to still be the data center capital of the world, and we're all going to be a part of that potentially some way, that we do it responsibly and we do it with open and transparent governance. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do. So thank you for your presentation. I did sit in virtually on December 9th. So it's good to get it again and see this and again, to keep these items, because I learned a few more items in this presentation having been at that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, ladies. Terrific report. For those of you that don't know, Culpeper County and the town of Culpeper are developing, well, we have developed the Culpeper Technology Zone, which is a nice little triangle of land in between Route 29 North and the town limits of Culpeper. Part of it's the town, part of it's the county. We will probably have 8 or 9 different separate little mini campuses of data centers, and they're very innovative. We feel like we're at the forefront of this new technology. We're going to pass all of our problems on to Orange County and take their water for cooling and everything. But we've been grappling with all of these issues, all these concerns. Everybody's worked hard to learn a lot. The more information that we get, the better off that we are. So thank you for this. I'll take it back. I have a town hall in June. I can answer some concerns. Our citizens are concerned about noise, water usage, you name it. We do have some really interesting things happening. The town of Culpeper is going to actually develop a program where their wastewater, gray water, correct, is going to be used for the cooling in one of the data centers, and then that'll be treated and then it goes out to the discharge. So we're trying really hard to balance that revenue that can come in versus all the concerns. We do have some that are being built, data centers and near residential, especially Old Town, Culpeper, which is my district. That's a real concern. I've talked to the data center folks about, green walls and green roofs and trying to make the buildings actually more attractive. So all kinds of issues for all of us to have fun with. And when you come to Culpeper on September 24th, I'll be happy to arrange a tour of our technology campus if everybody wants to kind of see where all that's going to be. All right, so it's been a long, hard fight. It has not been something that everybody has agreed on, but we're hoping and we're working hard that it's all going to work out best for everybody.
Mr. Chairman, before we go on, David, because of that experience, I'm just gonna put this out there. You can be thinking about it for when we come visit you in 3 months. What better tool authority from the General Assembly would have helped you in the planning and implementation process? And this isn't something to answer now, right? We can go, but take that back to your professional planners and your planning commissioners and ask that question, because that's something that I think would be worth talking about.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Delegate Holt. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think many of us have waited with bated anticipation to hear this report. And I was there, I think it was a Clean Energy Summit back in December, if I'm not mistaken, down in Richmond, where it was initially released. And I remember being told by Dominion, oh, the grid can handle it, the grid can handle it, the grid can handle it. And then this report came out, which showed us otherwise, right? And so for me, I'm very much interested in on what we're going to be able to do to handle this energy if many of our localities continue to move this way. But also, I thought it was very interesting that you put the research in there about the water usage, which has been very key in what the concerns of people in the Fredericksburg region have spoken to me about. And so I appreciate this. I know we have a whole other agenda, so I won't belabor the point. And if I do have any questions, I'll reach out. But thank you so much for being here today and sharing this information.
Thank you, Delegate Cole, for your short and concise comments. Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Delegate Scott. On the solar waterfront, data centers is out there for us. We're worried about the water usage, but we're more impacted with solar. But as far as the data centers, I've heard, whether it's true or not, that the data centers are looking to kind of go straight down 95 because it's costing too much to go on the western part of the state with all the lines and everything. Is that true?
I can say this, I don't know all the reasons why they're going down. I think that the infrastructure, the transmission infrastructure is down 95. And the other issue is, again, I mean, they like to be close to other data centers, so you just kind of see them. That's why they're kind of going, starting in.
Because I also heard it would be too much for the electric companies to provide a big line to go across to the western part of the state. That's what I've also. So.
Yeah, it's easier and cheaper to go to the power is.
But thank you for your report.
Mr. Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report. They're not knocking out Oregon and Essex County for data centers, but our neighbors to the north, I know are getting those types of development concerns, and so in Essex, we won't have any economic impact because we don't have any tax revenue coming in. So it's solely the environmental side, and it's been spoken to in length here today. Our biggest concern in Essex is the water withdrawal from Rappahannock River. I think that has tremendous economic impact, especially if you move from one watershed to another. I don't think a study has been done in that area. And so I would encourage, and this is a good start, but I think we need a more regional approach on this topic. This is probably the single most important topic we'll be facing in the coming decade, and more ongoing studies in this, because we don't know what we don't know at this point. And I'll conclude with just one question. You had in your report, you had kind of itemized small data centers and large data centers. Is there any impetus? I would imagine the drive is to large, these big data centers now. Is there any push at all? Is it bimodal to have any small data centers? Is everything just going gigantic?
I would say that for the most part, the trend is more to bigger data centers and data center campuses.
You know, there may be niche reasons to have, kind of small ones, but I would say the trend has been too big.
And so that speaks to the incompatible use when you get close to residential areas and so forth. So, thank you for that. Ms. Holmes.
Well, the benefit of going second to last is that you all have already, you know, answered a lot of the questions, but I did have a question about, when you talked about generators and pollution, did the study look at the difference between a tier 2 generator and a tier 4 or equivalent generator, and whether or not they're encased as to the amount of pollution that is produced?
They are, so by definition, the tier 2 generator has a higher emission rate, so the amount of time emissions are higher. They're tier 4, there's also equipment tied to tier 2 called a CR to reduce the emissions. And that's DEQ looks at the actual emissions amount, so regardless of whether you have a tier 2 or a tier 4, you're just capped at like tons of emissions sort of thing. So however they're getting to that number, whether it's tier 4 or tier 2, the same amount of pollution is the same, and that's how DEQ approaches it. So there aren't any requirements for tier 2 or tier 4. We do have a policy option that is part of the same. We could require that data centers, especially up in the northern Virginia area, because there's a zone used to.
Thank you. Sweet.
Dr. Young?
Thank you very much. So researching my trade, I noticed that in your research, you stated a lot, but then there was a comma, there was a but or a though. And I feel like you could have gone harder, but you pumped the brakes a little bit. So that's more reason why I need to talk to you all separately. So noises we can mitigate, the utilities we could control, but it's about the water here, right? And somebody asked earlier about, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And are they coming down 95? Yes, the infrastructure and water. We know that, and I know you couldn't answer that. But data centers, they bring revenue. And somebody that cares about the environment and what we leave behind for our grandchildren, my daughter's pregnant. And unfortunately, a lot of us, our grandparents didn't own 200 acres like Mr. Heisen over there. So, you know, it's on the people that own land right now, if they're gonna sell out, and then those become solar farms or data centers. In Stafford County, we grandfathered 4 before we knew what was happening. And then the other day I looked on the list and it turned into 13. I'm like, what happened? What's going on here? So we do our due diligence in Stafford County. We have code that we're pushing through as much as we can. It's like playing whack-a-mole sometimes because you have by right areas that doesn't matter how big they are, small as they are. I don't know if they want to do a substation for utilities. We just don't know. But when it comes to the water itself, I just was wondering if, I don't know if the executive team that we just developed or whatever, if we could think about a subcommittee to move forward. This should not be the end. And I know sometimes I come out with, you know, ideas that sometimes it takes a little bit to warm up to, but I think we need to continue this and we need to have a smaller group that delve in a little bit deeper, go a little further and bring things back if it's something that the commission is interested in, so that we could keep this up, because we need to know more. And when data centers as a whole, yes, they bring revenue, but as a whole, they're different ones working together. And when you say, how do you work against what you don't know? You look at where they were before, and what we did in Stafford County, we look at areas that they were 10 years down the line, not necessarily Loudoun or Purcellville, because they're still working it out. We're looking at best practices and looking at, you know, some of the issues that they may have had, and we may not want to do it. So potable water and purple pipes and all that is great, but as you said, you still need to try to prevent and make sure that they're partners with you. And this is something that we're working towards, making sure that the data centers folks are partners with us in our schools, in our environment, meaning that you're not going anywhere. So whatever you break, you're going to fix. So with that, I will yield, but if we could think about a smaller subcommittee to look at this further, whoever's interested, and bring back some information, recommendations, or bills or policies that we could give to our delegates. Some of them are in our room. I see Senator Durant, Delegate Melody, and Delegate Cole over here on the left. So, and you, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Moving to the online members. We have, actually, I'm gonna go with Delegate Higgins. I know that you got a few things, so Delegate Higgins, you're first up, and then we'll go to Ike Rodas after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right? No, you can't hear me. Okay, I can't hear very well with me speaking, so all of a sudden I've lost that. I don't want to put a garbled message out there and torture you for 3 minutes. I would like to say that I was in Loudoun County as a supervisor when we brought data centers to Loudoun County. There is a lot of angst out there about data centers. Some of it is very much agree with. Others of it is somewhat misinformation or impartial information. One of the things that was not mentioned today in this presentation is on the supply side of power. Data centers certainly are part of the equation, but they are not the total equation for our need for power. In our region, we've been having this string of power lines across Loudoun County and other areas. And those power lines are being strung as a result of 11,000 megawatts of power that are being taken off the grid in this area. And so, what's 11,000 megawatts? Well, my understanding is 11,000 megawatts is enough power for the state of Virginia plus about 30%. We're taking that off with no viable alternative. And I think originally renewables were hoped to be that alternative, but they're not base load capable of running the needs we have. So we need to look at this in a total situation, not just what the data centers use. My understanding was that the data centers and the ones in the pipeline up here are going to require 7,500 megawatts. I saw a number on slide number 6 that said 4140 megawatts, and I wasn't certain if that was just for Loudoun or where that was. But also looking at the revenue, the cost and the revenue, those can't be looked at in a vacuum either. When we look at the power that they pay for that power, yes, the cost of infrastructure are passed back into the grid. However, the infrastructure costs that are caused by shutting down power that we already have, doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm all for clean energy, but we need to have an alternative before we shut it down and have no power or not enough power to meet our needs. In addition to that, my understanding is virtually all of the new, well, I'll say all of the new data centers are being built with a closed system, so they are not losing water. Water's not disappearing. It's in a closed system, and I can find out the total numbers on that, but all the new ones are closed systems, so they're not dumping water or using it and recycling it totally within their own machine or whatever you want to call it. Just last but not least, I would say my experience has been data centers don't belong everywhere, certainly, and I have voted against them in the past, but they do belong somewhere. We were blessed with a lot of land in the airport, which you couldn't do anything else with it, and that's where most of them are, although there's been some encroachment elsewhere. But this encroachment elsewhere has created these problems, and I'll be honest, most of them have occurred in Prince William County. Data centers are being put in places they don't belong. Decisions by local politicians, and those bad decisions are kind of spreading bad information around the Commonwealth, which is unfortunate. Yes, there needs to be a strong eye looking at these at the local level and the things that are going to happen. But I think these decisions are best made at the local level, And they should be made by people that know what's going on and made responsibly. And so I want to wrap that with you. I will say that if anybody wants to talk to me about this offline, I'll be glad to talk with you. And I can share with you, my experience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Higgins, for your comments. And moving on to Mr. Broadus, you're want to wrap it up.
Very good. I will just, talking about the water use. I think that what each jurisdiction should know is that it's up to you as a jurisdiction as to whether your county enforces things the way, like for instance, at Fauquier County, we have put in place regulation in the ordinance that says that a data center must use recycled water. They have to use water over and over again rather than use it for evaporative cooling. In the commercial construction world, you can do cheaper cooling. You can use less energy if you have an unlimited supply of water that you can evaporate into the sky. But if you don't have an unlimited supply, then you spend a little more energy, but you use very little water. One of the data centers, for instance, very near some of my businesses, is it uses less than 800 gallons a day for the entire building, or the equivalent of maybe 2 to 3 houses for an 80,000 square foot data center. It's a small data center, but it would have roughly the same number of employees in it as a larger one, because most of the employees are security and maintenance, and you just don't need that many employees in there. It's mostly bathrooms and hand sinks that are causing the water usage, not cooling. But that's up to you as a county. Each county can determine whether that is in your ordinance. So I would say talk to your community development people, your zoning people, make sure your ordinance has water restrictions so that you're not tapping into resources that are limited. The other piece that hasn't been talked about is one of the other external impacts these data centers have is in their construction. There is typically and frequently a lot of dirt that has to be moved. Loudoun County has been impacted by this less than others, but Prince William has been hit pretty heavily. Fauquier has been really hit hard. And I know there are other counties out there who have been the recipients of this fill dirt that's coming off of these sites. So sometimes they'll go in there and they'll scrape down 20 acres and level it. And when they do that, they're pulling up whatever was in the ground before. That might be, curb and gutter and rebar and asphalt millings, things of that nature. And we have farms in Fauquier County where they are getting paid by the truckload to allow, they have up to 300 or 400 truckloads a day coming onto these things. One of the farmers has raised the level of his farm 40 feet above the natural grade. And we just recently got Senate Bill 1422 approved that will give us a little bit better enforcement capacity. But I would like to, and I'll volunteer Fauquier County to help coordinate this. I'd like to see if there are other counties that are experiencing the challenge. I'd love to see us coordinate some sort of regulatory capability that we can each make sure that we are aware when there's a site that is sending dirt to other places and sites that are receiving dirt, that we have some capacity to communicate with one another and make sure that dirt is going to places where it's legally permitted to go. So I'll just throw that comment out there and hope that we can put that on a future agenda or maybe establish a work group to address it separately.
Great. Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, there's one thing I forgot to mention, if I could have just a moment, 2 seconds.
Delegate Higgins, apologies, but we're gonna, because of time, it is now 2:45 and we need to move on with the agenda. And so I do appreciate the input that you did provide.
It would be one sentence. In Loudoun County, the revenue that we receive is $1 billion, okay? And that, it should be measured against any cost when you're.
All right, thank you so much for your time. This is something that everybody is very passionate about. And I know there's gonna be more conversations over the next upcoming years. This is not something we're gonna get resolved here in this room.
But a lot of good conversations are happening, and so I'm excited about that. Thank you so much for your time. With that, we're going to move on to staff. For a hopefully very brief overview, the handout. This one is several pages long, not as long as the JLARC study report, but,
I'm gonna stay right here, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the delegate Warwick putting me up first and then leaving, but that's okay. I provided you with this summary where we tried to go and pick out bills that have been sent by the assembly to the governor for his action. Hadn't quite processed that I was gonna be looking at his actions right before updating this, as of, you got the updated version at what, 5:30 last night? My apologies, but I'm at the mercy of others. I am not gonna walk through all of this. It gives you, there's some bills that are more consequential than others, but there are others there are many that don't look very consequential, but they're routine in terms of the conducting of day-to-day business, both the state and the local level. I'll call your attention to just a few. If you open it up, it starts with environment and water resources, then goes into energy, and then goes into land use. And feel free as you go through these, if you have a question about a particular bill and want to pop me a question, I'm in a better position to look into it. Some of these bills I had day-to-day experience with during the assembly. Some of them aren't my bailiwick. I have no background in energy. That is quickly looking to be changing, especially listening to today. So that whole section, I went through and identified the bills that are important to it, and you have the information here, but I'm not an energy expert. I'll call attention to Delegate Hodges' bill on page 6, 2327. It reestablishes the it extends the Virginia Groundwater Management Advisory Committee. And that's an important advisory group. I'll call your attention also on page 27, and it was referenced a little earlier by David Lee in a different way. HB 2749, which incorporated our chairman's bill, HB 2407, which responded to the water problem in Orange that was, in Culpeper, well, in Orange, but it affected Madison as well. Simply, because it was the same entity, but that's right. It was all the eastern part of Rappahannock Service Authority, which is Orange County, Lake Woods, excuse me. And the governor, your bill had a 6-hour notification. And that's what was sent to the governor. The governor sent back an amendment shortening the notification to 2 hours. So that's one where we had last minute change. And we talked about that both at the September meeting and December meeting. Let's see, on page 8, HJ 437, this reestablished the Joint Subcommittee on Recurrent Flooding, which had been allowed to sunset in 2023. And so I think that'll be a joint subcommittee that we followed previously, and we will follow again as we go forward. Let's see. Have under energy on page 11, HB 1779, which specifically adds fusion energy to the list of generation sources that are qualified as carbon free. That's a policy change. Let's see. Kimberly referred to, I believe it was HB 2084, Delegate Shin's bill. And that's on page 13, which calls for, Kimberly, you want to help me with that one? That's the one that you referenced in answer to the question. Yeah.
Yes, so this is a bill, that basically directs the SCC under their, existing proceedings, to determine, whether Canadian energy and Appalachian power are using small classification for customers, and to consider whether new or different instrument classes would be better. So I kind of already have this authority, but this is just rather than go ahead and do that sometime in the next.
And that, they're supposed to complete that process by July 27th.
Yep.
Right? So that's something we'll want to follow. See a number of bills in the following pages, government veto. You have a bill that the governor has provided a substitute, which I couldn't access last night. On page 16, HB 2537, that among other things, Department of Environmental Quality will be preparing sample model ordinances for localities to look at for energy storage. So that's something to be paying attention to.
Helen, can you clarify that, meaning to promote them or what?
Okay, HB 2537.
Yeah.
All right, you've got the explanation of the bill that went to the governor. The governor has sent back to the assembly a substitute. I haven't been able to read that substitute. It wasn't accessible online last night. So I'm not sure what's.
Okay, but I'll put that back.
It is on the topic because it has to be germane. It's about energy cycles. Battery storage. And battery storage. And one of the products that you would prepare model ordinances for localities to consider relative to regulating battery storage facilities. Increase of water quality and something like that. The whole gamut, I think, setback, everything.
I think sometimes, just a quick comment, I think some of these things get kind of in the nuance that are really important to maybe our localities, but are like sort of maybe on the fringe or outside of the actual scope of what this commission is supposed to look at, and that's what the quality.
Right. Okay, on page 20 is SB 1165, that was also earlier on HB 2024, they were identical. The bill started out, it went to the governor and said that no state agency, no locality could prohibit the use of equipment in solar that is U.S. environmental, that meets U.S. EPA recommendations of specification standards and required in federal purchasing. The governor has amended that and sent it back to the assembly and broadened that to say solar equipment manufactured in the United States, whose locality will be able to regulate. I'm on page 21, SB 1165. And most of you, all of you know my bias. I come from a local government background, is local government authority to make decisions. So I looked at this one as introduced as one that, okay, it's limiting local government authority relative to the equipment in solar projects, but the threshold was it met US EPA standards. Okay, that's the way the bill passed the assembly and went to the governor. That did not garner much local government objection. This says all it has to do is be manufactured in the United States. That to me is a lot broader. Now, I just read it for the first time at 4 o'clock yesterday. So I want to read it again, but that one gives me a little concern coming back to yes.
I fall back on the assumption that the panels manufactured in the United States are already regulated to that particular standard.
I don't know.
So, I mean, without having a comment from governor staff on that, I'm not gonna opine on that thought process.
Yeah, I mean, we really need to hear from them what their thinking is and why that's a better choice. It's a much broader limitation on local authority than was in the bill that was successfully passed by bipartisan vote and sent to the government. So I just flagged that one for you. And then I'm going to move on to land use. Bill was referenced page 22, HB 1601, Senate containing SB 1449 on the last page. And this one, would require localities, as sent to the governor, will require localities to do, sound studies if the data centers were within a very close proximity to schools or residential, and then empower localities to request similar studies in other circumstances. So as a, page 22, the governor sent it back and changed the must. There is a requirement in the bill as sent to the governor that if the data center is within, and I don't remember what's 500 feet of residential or school, there had to be a sound study. The governor changed that to there may be. The county could ask for it rather than require it, and puts a reenactment. And I'll just do this from my civics perspective. Say this carefully. In my 35 years of doing this, I've never seen a bill be enacted. Now, a bill similar might come back the next year and pass. We're in a wreck.
That's what the kids think about the idea of a reenactment clause.
Well, most of you guys don't like reenactment clauses put on your bills, right?
It's, all it says is resubmit it again next year,
Start
and
over.
so.
Way of killing it without killing it.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, and in the off season, you might make some
Tweaks.
some
Exactly.
fixes, but it's gonna be a similar bill the following year, it just might have a different patron.
Right, thank you. So I said that carefully. Page 23, bottom of the page, HB 2533, it empowers localities to add to your comp plan accessory dwelling units within single family zones. And for the first time in state code, it actually defines an accessory. Okay, so that's a positive step. It provides definition. It's not a mandate. It's permissive. Page SB 974, bottom of page 24. This one, for all administrative approvals of land use actions. So a site plan, subdivision plan, where it's a ministerial act. In other words, you've got a checklist. They do everything in the checklist. It's approved. It's not a legislative act. It's not a rezoning. So in those ministerial decisions, some smaller localities have them go through the planning commission and the governing body. Most large localities just have an agent. This would say agent, period. It's to speed the process for residential approvals. That is the genesis of it. Now, if you're a locality that has less than 5,000 population, you can stick with the way you might do today, which is the approval by, let's say, the planning commission or the town council, for example. There's some enhanced civil penalties bills. I just highlight relative to zoning violations. One on residential and another one on commercial. And then SB 1422 that Supervisor Broadus brought up at bottom of page 25, that deals with that excavation debris. And an open question that Supervisor Broadus has to this group, you know, it would help you in this situation, or is it should go farther? I think this was about as far as Fauquier was able to move the ball on this one. There have been other attempts in previous years for additional authority. Fauquier finds themselves so close to Northern Virginia. They are where waste material gets dumped first. And look at it this way, Fauquier could be the canary in the coal mine as those big developments continue to move south. So I would invite on the supervisor's behalf for you to take this back to your staffs and talk to them. Is this something that is a concern? Are you having dumping where it's pushing the limits of the individual property authority to accept debris material? And then I highlighted a couple of budget items. I'm not going to go through them. Chairman, I've taken away too much time.
Thank you, Mr. James, for that brief presentation of the packet here. I encourage everybody to take a look at that and do a little bit more research. If you have any other questions, you can reach out to any of the legislative members on this commission or your own individual representatives. And we will be more than happy to direct you to our staff, who will give you more information. Next up on the agenda is a report on the 2025 General Assembly session, legislative members. We're gonna go backwards this time. So Delegate Higgins, you're up first on legislative session updates.
You're still on mute.
You're on mute, sir. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be short and sweet and won't bother to list the 15 bills that either were not heard or were not allowed to get out of committee. But I will mention one that I put in, and that was HB 2424. That was rolled into HB 2474, which was the parents overdose bill that got approved. The governor signed it to let parents know about overdoses, particularly fentanyl, in their schools, and we're proud to make that happen. The other bills that were co-signed on, but I will let the others talk about them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Delegate Higgins. Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think I had any bills related to the commission this session. And I think Elder did a great job explaining what the general gist of the session was. So I yield.
Delegate Kent.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Davis. We still have a little bit of work to do on our side, maybe for reconvening for some legislation that we were working on that had some tweaks done to it, but just looking forward to next week.
Senator Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with my colleague. We've got a lot to do and talk about now. And as you said, there's, especially with a lot of the subject matter we're coming now, we're not going to solve it this time, but this conversation's become a lot more relevant as been before the General Assembly, so we're very helpful. I appreciate the agenda. Thank you.
And Delegate Milday.
So Hospital 2084, that was mentioned now several times. If that doesn't work, making sure we're not paying for data centers in our rental bills. And some of one of our delegates is a hawk on data centers, Ian Lovejoy. He doesn't think it's enough. I don't say it yet, but I think that you'll see some broad consensus to try to make sure that happens. I also just have to mention Supervisor Broadus and Eldon. I happen to have a cousin who lives next to a guy named Hawkins in Fauquier County. This guy is trucking in hundreds of dump truck loads of dirt and calling it farming activity. It's the most egregious, crazy thing I've ever seen. And if that bill that Bryce Reeves is pushing through will affect that, I would just be really happy, because it's a mess. And I'd love to talk to anyone from Fauquier County about that. It wants to be heard.
And then I'll be the last legislative member to give an update. The water reporting bill was mentioned by Mr. James, and that was a heavy lift, a lot heavier lift than what we thought it would be starting off to address the water issue. All the stakeholders started getting in the mix of it, and we were even up to the 11th hour before committee presentation, revising that and making sure that all the work that we had done to get that bill ready for prime time was handed off to Delegate Levere Bowling. And when she took the bill, we would continue to work with her. She ended up having her baby right after crossover. And so she was out of the picture once it went over to the Senate. And so my office continued to work with her office to make sure that the back and forth between the Senate and House, it was in the right posture as a Senate version. And when it went to the governor, the two bills were the same. So the governor's team didn't have to try to marry those. And then the reporting time going from 6 hours down to 2 hours. Not sure what the thought process is there, but I've already talked to Senator Reeves and he's good to go with that time frame. Originally, we had wanted to allow 6 hours. That way the authority could have time to determine whether or not it really was a significant issue. But it's not the 1 hour that Pennsylvania has. And so we're getting double the amount of time that Pennsylvania has for reporting such things. And so looks like that's going to be the final version. I've talked to some stakeholders already and they're okay with that. And if it's too much of a problem, there's always next year to extend that reporting time. And so that's really all that I have. for that. And I was actually gonna turn it over to the chairman, but, that's me. So with that being said, on to the next point of the agenda, it's future meeting dates and locations. You have those there in the agenda for June 18th, September 24th, and December 3rd. And then moving on to the last point of the agenda is identification of potential future agenda items. It's already been mentioned to have some energy representatives here at the next meeting to discuss some of those things. Is there any other potential agenda items that this body would like to present, Dr.
There's an
Young?
agenda item or just a decision that you should, we could have a subcommittee to discuss things, but I thought there was an agenda item already on that committee from the gentleman Botus. So I wasn't sure if the committee wanted to take that.
I agree with Dr. Young, the regional, to look at it regionally, the water supply, how these industrial uses affect everyone downstream.
So maybe we could have some of the different water authority groups.
What I will do is we have, I think on the 19th of April, the next technical committee. I'm gonna take this back to the technical committee and we'll figure out how best to do that.
Okay.
So that it's kind of in an organized fashion. And bring it back for a recommendation, how we can move forward in a way that, they're least likely to spin on wheels. It's that way. And then we have for September, we've got some tech, tour. I think I better sit in our next meeting. It's really our next meeting. Since we will be in the lower basin June 18th, I'll do some talking with folks down that way. Is there some aspect of the data center conversation from the lower basin perspective that maybe we can hear that kind of build on the discussion that we're having and move that ball forward?
Yes, is there a time to finish something on the cost?
We absolutely do. Okay.
What was that?
PFAS.
Okay.
And you have the first, there's bill dealing with the Aquaquan Reservoir. As you'll see in here under the Water Resources that passed, got to the governor sent back amendments correctly. That's the first real PFAS reporting bill that has passed in the Senate. There were some others that did not make it.
Any other potential future agenda items for June 18th? Hearing none, do we have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor? Aye. Third.